Welcome to Sanity, a podcast by the New York Sun. My name is A.R. Hoffman, and every week, along with my co-host Rebecca Sugar, we try to make sense out of the nonsense and bring a little bit of sanity to your week.
That's a tough call this week
This is a
to
tough
bring
week.
sanity. This is a rough one.
A lot of nonsense this week.
The quote of the week is attributed to Margaret Thatcher, but she didn't say it. But she could have said it, and I liked it. So this is the quote.
Yeah. As Liz Truss said to us, Mrs. Thatcher.
Mrs. Thatcher, the great Mrs. Thatcher. Yeah. Quote, "In the end, more than freedom, they wanted security. They wanted a comfortable life, and they lost it all, security, comfort, and freedom. When the Athenians finally wanted not to give to society, but for society to give to them, when the freedom they wished for most was freedom from responsibility, then Athens ceased to be free and was never free again." So do I even have to spell out why I chose that quote the week that Zoran Mamdani won as a socialist in New York City?
Yeah. And just, how, and we had a great conversation with Heather McDonald of the Manhattan Institute. You can check that out on Sunday of really how precarious thriving is and how precarious, civilization is. And I think we're about to get a new lesson in that. Yes. Our main top story of the week, obviously, will be the election here of Zoran Mamdani as the new mayor of New York. We'll analyze everything about that and kind of look at it from all sides. And then our Make It Make Sense section will leave the five boroughs mercifully for a few minutes and head down to D.C., metaphorically speaking. And
whoever thought that trip would be
I was just going to say, right, the Amtrak trip down. And we'll talk about tariffs. We'll talk about the filibuster. And then we have a kind of a fun grab bag, I think, for you with our sunlights and sunburns. So, we're kind of, I guess reeling is the right word. It's one of those things where his victory is shocking, but not surprising, right? Yeah. We knew that, since he won the nomination, it was going to take an epic fight to defeat him, and Andrew Cuomo was just not capable of mounting that fight or even beginning to mount that fight. The result in the end was kind of close, mostly because support for Sliwa declined, but even if Sliwa had left the race, it looks like Mamdani would have won.
Yeah.
Mamdani got more than 1 million votes, which is a landmark in New York. On the other hand, his percentage of the vote, of Democrats was not high. So anyway, his history is 2020, hindsight's 2020. This was a beatable candidate. The Democrats couldn't figure out how to beat him.
Right.
And so now we live in Zoran's world.
Yes. So, right. So how he won, right? We talked before about the weak candidacy of Andrew Cuomo. No need to sort of double down on that. It's now obvious that was part of the problem. But the demographics, right? We've talked about this off camera, were interesting, right? So Mamdani dominated the under 30 demographic, particularly women. He got 81% of the female vote, right?
Astounding.
Shocking. And he also got 85% of people who've lived in New York City for fewer than 5 years. That's people who've come here from Idaho and people who've come here from other countries. So there's something to say about that. And of course, working class voters only went for him 39%. So he's not representing the people whose, bleeding knuckles he was talking about in his victory speech, actually. Right. He's really talking about those people in the middle. And for me, I'm curious to hear what your takeaways are, but I had sort of two truths that seem like they conflict, came out of this for me. It's sort of tempting to say that we educated and imported the problem, right? We educated a generation of young kids in these indoctrination camps called American universities, where Marxism was celebrated and everything Western culture was denigrated. And we allowed immigration from anywhere, for any reason, without vetting and without ensuring that the people who were coming here wanted to celebrate the values of the country that was adopting them. And so you could say that those two things clearly helped Zoran Mamdani, that and the fact that women seem to be cracking up. But I think there was also a really interesting article in Breitbart by John Carney. I just pulled a quote from it, which I think is a softening of what I just said, at least in terms of trying to understand these sort of hipster Brooklyn latte drinking people and to hate on them a little bit less, not a lot less, because I think they're deserving of some scorn. But here's what John Carney wrote. This is Mamdani's real base. Not trust fund socialists, but what we might call the professionally precarious. They have credentials and decent incomes, but just holding on, barely, to housing, jobs, and their social position. They followed the script they were handed and discovered that the promised rewards had been replaced with a treadmill. They own nothing, and they do not like it. Right?
Yeah, it's a good piece. I saw that too. Lots to say. I think there's no question that, the famous political chestnut goes that to really win a race you don't inherit an electorate, you create one, right? So when Obama won, people talk about the rise of the young, upwardly mobile, diverse coalition, and people thought that was going to be a permanent majority. Of course it wasn't. Trump in really astonishing ways has created a base that the Republicans hadn't known before. And so everyone successfully who wins does big races, and Mamdani really did that. He did that. He tapped into a changing New York. This is now the city with 1 million Muslim citizens. People talk about, well, it's the biggest Jewish city in the world, but it's also the biggest Muslim city in America. And so you have to attend to that. You have to attend to age and gender. I think all that is right. I think it's true to say that his real, the base of the base, is this group of people. Michael Barone in our pages calls it the barista proletariat, with the kind of condescension. But I actually think you can condescend or not, but it's a real group of people who are educated, largely came here from elsewhere post-college. I mean, I know a lot of these people.
Me too,
They live in Brooklyn.
They earn great salaries.
Yeah, or good salaries.
From a national average point of view, they're above the median, and they're earning $100,000, $150,000 some of them a year, and they can't get by with 2 children.
Or forget about children. They have housemates. They live in
right. They don't get married.
They don't get married, right? I mean, it's so and what they're seeking, I think, largely is not just free stuff. Everyone wants free stuff, but a sense of belonging and purpose. And I think a lot of those folks found it in the pro-Palestinian movement. I think that intensity, that sense of a cause, and I think Zoran tapped into that and is overlaps with that and is sort of the successor to those marches and demonstrations.
And importantly, the Republicans, myself included, sort of heap a lot of scorn on these people as they drink their lattes for $10 each and complain that they can't get ahead in life. And you say, well, then you shouldn't have, gotten a degree in gender studies at Bowdoin or Haverford or whatever. But and so there's something to be said. That's true, meaning the entitlement, the resentment, the envy, it's also ugly and not sympathetic. On the other hand, as John Carney's pointing out, you have to contend with it. It's out there en masse. To some degree, the generation prior sold them that story. Go to some liberal arts college, get a useless degree, and you will
work
be
in the
somebody.
Sort of vaguely nonprofit sphere, or even in the for-profit sphere, but not.
You're some marketing cog in a wheel, in a big wheel, and you're, and then they throw TikTok in their faces with girls in designer outfits, and everybody's drinking the latte, and they want those things, and they think that that's what they're entitled to because everybody else has it, and so to some degree we ignored that mess and we just made fun of it. And I think Carney's calling our attention to it to say, time to stop just mocking it because this is the result. Mamdani is our mayor.
And imitation is the highest form of flattery, and I think we're going to see other people copying this playbook. It shows that a far left politics can win at the ballot box, and that is really as a proof of concept. Now, of course, it's New York. Of course, it's not okay, but still, I mean, the idea that a campaign that was avowedly socialist, backed by Bernie Sanders, backed by AOC, all that, was able to win an executive job, the biggest executive job. Maybe you can argue one of the top 3 political jobs in America. You say president's 1, maybe a couple governorships, but the mayor of New York is a huge job and a very visible job. And that's where I worry a little bit is, these things, these politics have jumped from kind of like gestures and slogans and online to like real political power.
Right. And the really deep concern about that, Ari, is that these are people who are really adept at pointing out problems and have no solutions to any of them, nor do they even feel a need to provide a solution, as Mamdani doesn't. Mm-hmm. He knows that the things he's proposing can't work and won't work and will make things worse. That's sort of beside the point. The point is to point out the problem. The point is to complain. And there's a whole generation of people, it seems. Some of them are the 20-year-olds and the 30-year-olds we discussed who have a sense of entitlement, whether it's real or in their heads, but they have it. And so they love to complain.
It's not just them. You don't win this race without also getting a lot of other people.
Well, but this sort of immigrant point here is to say, of course, that we've had in America for the last few years, certainly under the Biden administration, sort of a welfare state, a kind of a socialist welfare state of sorts. If you came here, you got free everything. Why wouldn't they vote for Mamdani? They want more free everything. They think that that's what it means to come here as an immigrant, that they're entitled to low-income housing and food stamps and everything else. And so you could argue whether they are or aren't, but that's the attitude out there, and it's shared by these two very disparate groups, funny enough. But they came together under the Mamdani banner, who isn't going to deliver any of that to either of those groups, but who is really good at winking and smiling and promising it to them, and that's enough for people.
Yeah, but for sure. But he will say the things those groups want to hear. He'll validate those positions. I mean, how thrilling if you've been chanting about, this nonsense about genocide and famine in Gaza for 2 years to now have that be the official position, right? I mean, you talk about, seeing yourself in the people in power. Yeah. It must be a real thrill to have captured the political machinery here.
Yeah, and I guess also it's sort of sad but true to say, for all of our talk about his anti-Israel rhetoric and beliefs, and for all of his talk about Islam, and for all of John Jay's talk, right, in Virginia about killing Republicans and peeing on the graves of their children. Voters don't care.
They don't care.
And so we can moralize about that and sort of beat our chest about it, or we could just be practical and say, why doesn't the other side talk about affordability and the things that matter? Like win. Don't try to win morally, but actually try to win. Yeah. And then insert your values afterwards. But the Israel conversation just fell flat. Nobody cares.
I think just generally, like, people don't care anymore what politicians have said in the past. It's just a losing strategy, And with him, like, God knows there was enough material. I mean, it's any of these statements 10, 15 years ago would have been disqualifying. We forget about the Israel stuff. The stuff about the NYPD. Yeah. You're going to be the mayor, and you say that, it's like there's a picture of you holding up your middle finger saying, fuck the NYPD, and it's anti-race, it's racist, anti-whatever it was. Yeah. I mean, so all this stuff should be immensely disqualifying.
Right.
I still think, there's now a need to formulate a really effective opposition. I think a candidate who was running as an independent, who was sort of like addressing these issues, could have won, and I say that not to kind of like cry over spilled milk, but to say, like, the threat of this far left infiltratration is real, and it needs to be really thought through.
So we should maybe talk about what we think he actually can and cannot achieve. And we were just talking with Heather McDonald about ways of slowing him down and allowing the impact of his bad ideas to be felt on the street in advance of the midterm elections for the Republicans and just the next mayoral elections, so that people wouldn't vote a similar candidate in again. But what do you think he'll be able to actually do versus what he says he's going to do that he can't do?
Yeah, I mean, obviously he's coming off a resounding win. He has a lot of political capital. He's going to, just about every single upper echelon person, political appointee, is going to have his point of view. Meaning, I mean, I don't want to generalize by our listeners. We have a lot of different folks who listen to us, but, imagine your instinct in any situation. These people are going to have exactly the opposite, right? I mean, they're going to be entirely enthralled to wokeness, DE, whatever you want to say.
Trans surgery is for everyone.
Beyond.
Here.
So it's the only limitation
happen.
is going to be, practically what the opposition is and what just the inertia of the system is.
Yes.
Because every single one of these people is going to be like a kid in a playground.
Right. And what worries me about that actually the most is not just what will happen while Mamdani is here, but he's going to embed these people. Democratic socialists are going to be all over these city agencies and local government agencies, and they don't leave when the mayor leaves.
Yeah.
And so for years, maybe a generation, we could have people with his thinking sort of embedded in our system.
Yeah.
So like restraining him with lots of lawsuits just to delay things until the negative effects can be felt, I think is one strategy, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think the mayor has a fair amount of latitude. I mean, some of these experiments are gonna get off the ground. I mean, whether they work or not, I don't know. People said that De Blasio wouldn't be able to do, pre-K. He did. Bloomberg did a ton. Now, again, these were people who were, I think, less De Blasio, but someone like Bloomberg were operating at a very, very high level of competence, and you obviously won't have that here.
So let's talk just specifically the police, right? The fire commissioner whom we interviewed on this show a few weeks ago already resigned, Robert Tucker. And we just talked with Heather McDonald. I was under the assumption that Jessica Tisch, the New York City police commissioner, would just run for the hills to save her own reputation. You and Heather feel that she'll stick it out until she sees that she can't control things. But you would imagine that in the police department it's already being talked about that a lot of the best and the brightest are looking for jobs elsewhere, and they're being recruited to other states.
We spoke to Ray Kelly about this, and he said there's a real deficit in terms of police officers. I think the ethos is going to be anti-police. I think there's no question about that. It should be noted that Alvin Bragg won his election too. Mm-hmm. So now you have kind of a Bragg, Mamdani double
Perfect
team.
Storm.
Yeah, no, it's really concerning.
There are also things I was thinking, like, what can Mamdani do via the police to disrupt other sectors, like this whole thing about free buses, which everyone understands, like the MTA would have to be involved in. And there are limits on that, but you know what he can do? He can instruct the police to not enforce anything. Like if people don't pay their fare, like the police won't arrest you. So de facto, it'll be free.
I think one of the hard things I have with Mamdani, it's not like a politician who I say like, okay, I don't, let's say Trump or something. Like, okay, maybe you don't like him personally. Maybe some of his ideas are good, some are bad. That seems to be a normal. With Mamdani, it's like I don't even have to think about the Israel-Jewish stuff because all of the ideas are bad.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Like it's kind of which makes it maybe hard for me to get the appeal a little bit. We were talking off camera about what's the pull? Like for me, the bus thing is crazy. It's the bus isn't that expensive. It's 200.
Half the people aren't paying anyway now.
And it's heavily subsidized, as Heather McDonald noted in her piece in The Spectator, for people who can't pay.
Right.
So
who aren't even signing up for the subsidies, because they're just not paying anyway.
Right. So what are we doing here, right? So my dad
Imagine being a bus driver in New York. Have we thought about the poor bus drivers who are going to be driving these mobile homeless units?
They don't check the tickets anymore because people are like attacking them.
Right. But now, can you imagine? There'll be a mass exodus of bus drivers in New York, wouldn't there?
Or like my dad's in his late 70s, takes the bus every day. If there are homeless people living on, why wouldn't someone live on the bus?
Of course.
Yeah,
it's warm. We're headed into winter.
And you just go around this thing. I mean, it's, so I don't mean to be flip about it. I really don't get it.
Yeah.
I really don't think that the problem is that the bus is $2.90.
But this is, again, the style over substance discussion we've been having, right? Yeah. It's just merit in today's world is defined as, do you smile at the camera and say the pretty thing that people want to hear? That's how you win an election. But you can't actually do anything that you say you're going to do.
The rent stuff. All my friends, basically, who support Mamdani, none of them live in rent-controlled apartments. So I don't get it, right? Like, how is this going to help you?
Yes.
I'm not saying that some things.
Do they have an answer when you ask them that question?
See, that's why I think that's what we, and again, we do tune in with our conversation with Heather McDonald. She knows a lot more about the city than we do. But, I wonder how much of this isn't actually about these proposals. I mean, it's not a huge insight, but I think if you're asking those questions, you're almost speaking at a frequency that's like not the main one.
As to the sort of Israel stuff, he's threatened all kinds of things. let's say, for instance, he threatened to withhold city pension funds from Israeli bonds and assets. So, okay, can he do that? Like, technically, no. There are restraints, but they're not great, those restraints on him. There are boards that you have to go through, but the board has a mayoral appointee on it.
He's a powerful figure. I mean, he's an
he
executive.
He can place people there who would favor his policies on that. So you could delay it and lawsuit it to death, but who knows? In 2 years, he might just come out on top of that issue.
And I think what we've seen in cities, cities I love, like, what we love, Paris, London, Montreal, the deterioration in the Jewish condition in these cities is rarely like overnight. It's everything becoming less safe, more threatening. So it's not so much about like, okay, well, is it this one swastika on a school? It's more like, and something Jews haven't known in America ever, maybe you could say, but our ancestors in Europe knew well, and the Middle East. What does it mean to have a government that is fundamentally hostile to you? And we've never had that, for a long time, and I think we're about to have it. And I'm not saying there's going to be like, awful things tomorrow, but for example, pulling funding from the Technion campus. That's a tragedy. I mean, that was one of those American miracles where you have Israeli ingenuity and American ingenuity coming together to make the city better. He's not gonna march in the Israel Day parade. Now that sounds silly, but it sends a message. And I think you're gonna see signals like that all over.
Agreed. He might, not have funding for police to help guard, synagogues on the high holidays.
Yeah,
he
or
might
your
have
next
just little
big
things like that
pro-Palestinian
matter.
and march is going to be like a balagan, as they say. I mean, it's really because it's now going to be officially supported, and on a kind of informal social level, I think the ostracization of Jews is going to ratchet up. Because the idea is now it's endorsed culturally and politically.
And by the way, I would add to that, I mean, we feel that issue very intensely, but I wouldn't like to be a white Christian male, in this city under his leadership either. Yeah. They are equally endangered. It just doesn't show up in the same way, in the same overt way, and he's not speaking about them in the same way, but there's little love lost because this is an identity politics candidate. And so all the usual suspects are assaulted by people like that or sidelined or whatever. And that's not just the Jews, let's be clear. Christian, the Rockefeller Center tree lighting, which was surrounded by a mob of pro-Palestinian activists last year, that tree could get burned down for all I know under a Mamdani administration. I wonder if there'll be a policeman left to arrest anybody who lit the match. Yeah, I mean, it just struck me as at his victory party, well, maybe it might have been two parties, but I'm just kind of conflating them. But, you had, Mehdi Hassan, Mahmoud Khalil, Jamal Bowman. Yeah. This is the regime now. Right. This is the regime that's in place. And as you said, they're hostile to all those things. I even saw it in I get it, campaigns are nasty, whatever, but the nastiness towards Cuomo in the speech where he said, I hope I never have to say your name again. Yeah. I mean, that edge, and that
then,
smiley guy thing he did all during the campaign was certainly
gone. I
hope
I never have to say your name again, right? I mean, that there's something that's like the
I mean, I think that about Cuomo, but I would never say it on camera.
But in your victory speech?
No, it's terrible.
I mean, come on. So,
I wouldn't want to be the mother of a child in a public school here. It's as if it's not bad enough already. Jamal Bowman running it. What will be left of public schools for your child?
Well,
nothing
multiple
good.
Level one, he doesn't want mayoral control. And I was talking to a source the other day. Said this is insane. What mayor doesn't want more control over the biggest item in the budget? Yes. So he's totally uninterested. He's totally led it to the wolves, meaning the teachers union. Mm-hmm. And secondly, he wants to get rid of these, gifted programs. Yes. I mean, it's really a tragedy.
A tragedy.
It's really a tragedy.
So crime will skyrocket, rents will go up, not down. There'll be less housing, not more, and public schools will be terrible.
Like a little bit shittier. I mean, but I also think it's important to say that, it's reasonable to say I am against this candidate, I am against this politics, regardless of any outcome. Do you know what I mean? Like, this isn't, I think, culturally and ideologically, it's important to say that it's not that this is bad because there's going to be 3 more murders. Like, this is bad because it's bad. you know?
Excellent point, right? The idea that socialism should have a place in American society is frightening, and it's an indicator of our failure to educate a generation of people who should have known better.
Yeah.
And there is no place for democratic socialism / communism.
Yeah.
And that
National
should have been,
socialism.
That should have been a non-starter, and national socialism. There should have been a non-starter, and that we have to go back to the beginning and explain to people why it should be is really the tragedy of this whole thing, isn't it?
Yeah, and I hope, you know, in the kind of like make lemonade out of lemons, I hope that this is bracing and clarifying and shows people, that makes it clear where the chessboard is. I want to just make one more point, and that is that, you know, obviously there were other races and we saw Democratic wins in virtually every race. Now, we have an editorial on this, warning to Republicans, and I think it's true. I mean, you can qualify every victory. You could say New Jersey's Democratic anyway, and the candidate in Virginia was bad. I think, though, Republicans, you know, complacency would be a mistake here. I think in politics, it's always a pendulum. I think it always goes the other way. You know, Democrats were on their back foot for a long time, but
I want to just add to that. I agree, and Republicans didn't just lose; they lost badly, even though those were Democratic states. Like it was terrible.
Yeah.
And so there's no getting around that, and we have to figure out why and what to do next. I say we. I'm not really. I don't identify as a Republican anymore. But that's true. But it's also true that the Democrats have to figure out what they're going to do with a party that they've been pretending for a long time still has a moderate base, which is no longer moderate in any way, and everyone can see it now in open air. And so maybe that's the win of Mamdani for people who dislike Mamdani, is that the cloak has come off. And you can now see that what we had under Biden was sort of semi-socialist, semi-welfare state. Now we just have it expressed and doubled down on. And so all this pretending that Democrats were moderate, that you could talk to people like Chuck Schumer, and that, you know, but they bowed to the left. We're all relying on Governor Hochul now until hopefully she gets replaced, that maybe she'll restrain Mamdani. Yeah. She has to worry about her left.
For sure.
And
she endorsed him.
It doesn't matter if these Democrats pretend to be moderates, say they're moderates, or we, you know, cut checks to their PACs and hope that they'll be moderates. It's what they do that matters, and what they do is give in to the left.
Yeah. I mean, at the moment, the TAC is going to say, well, we're just a Big Ten, but you know, there's going to be a moment for choosing, and there's going to, you know, eventually.
Look, if we can't have Nick Fuentes in our tent on the then they can't have Zohar Mamdani in their tent on the left, and that, like, Josh Gottheimer might be the only one on the left I heard of who said that or John Fetterman, is just despicable. Like, shame on them all. And I wouldn't vote for a single Democrat. It's just a sort of
Well, I've said, we talked
point.
about this on this program. I thought Hochul and Jeffries were totally spineless. Schumer beyond. At least you could say they actually endorsed. Schumer just sat it out. I mean, that is more ridiculous than anything. I think that's right. I mean, I think, you know, Democrats have this kind of now maybe like a poisoned chalice here, where they have this star who pulled off a big win, but, you know, they probably don't want to, you know, I mean, how they handle him will be really interesting. And how far they keep him. I'm just saying, you know, Trump's at a 39% approval rating. Inflation is stubborn.
41. Don't steal 2 points.
You know, so I think there's real possibility of a significant backlash.
Can I just, on personal note, you know, talk to the camera, to my friends, Mara, Kim, and Lynn, who listened last week when I said I may vote for Sliwa. They weren't happy campers when I said that. So I'm just going to say to you now, I did vote for Cuomo in the end. So don't be angry at me.
And I know how much you hate Cuomo.
I really had to hold my nose and grit my teeth, but I did it because I couldn't bear your wrath.
Yeah. No, that was a PSA. Yeah.
Okay,
so let's move on. Obviously, this is going to be an ongoing story, and we'll be covering it as it develops here. Okay, so make it make sense. I think two sort of interesting topics today. One, I'll kind of maybe just go by this quickly. There was Supreme Court arguments yesterday over Trump's tariffs. I think the court was really skeptical. The court was really skeptical of the president's ability to do this, not the liberals only, but Roberts and Gorsuch. I think there's a fair chance these get struck down. And I think Trump will really have to figure out, like, who is he without his tariffs and what does his program look like? Maybe not entirely, but in large part.
You think they're going to, you're saying they're going to strike them all down, or there's some of them that,
well, maybe some will stay, but some are invoked under this like specific rule. I think the bottom line is that, the Constitution, for better or for worse, says that taxes is controlled by Congress. So the question is, like, are these taxes? And the administration says they're not. They're like duties or they're whatever. Is a tariff a tax?
Interesting. Was it Amy Coney Barrett who was asking a question about what the impact would be to the economy if they repealed the tariffs?
Yeah.
Like, is that a factor in their decision making?
Yeah, that's a good question.
It doesn't sound like a legal question.
It doesn't. It doesn't sound
concerned,
like a legal question.
Right?
Yeah, the question is like, a lot of the questions were, could Congress like give the president that authority? Meaning, like, could they say, okay, we get the power of the purse, but we want to give it to you? And that's known as the delegation doctrine. Can one branch kind of delegate its powers to another branch, and how that works? Devil's in the details with that. So we won't know about that though till likely June. So put that on hold.
It's super important because given the impact of the economy and affordability on this election, and maybe in some of the other elections that just happened, like the idea that Trump's economic plans would be interfered with in that way, and the upset that could cause the economy, could really be impactful for the midterms. So it's a very heavy issue for this administration.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other question is tied to the shutdown. We talked a little bit last week. I looked up some numbers. Increasingly Americans are blaming everybody for the shutdown. One thing to watch is the announcement that some airspace is going to be shut down next week if it continues. That's, people aren't going to be happy. Yeah, exactly.
Can I just read what Senator John Kennedy said about the shutdown?
Always a good quote.
Worth quoting. He said, "This government shutdown is a perfect example of why the aliens lock their doors when they fly past Earth."
Amazing.
Right?
Who would even think of aliens flying past Earth?
It's the best. It's so true.
It's so fun.
So true. If I were a little green man, I would like lock the door and like pull the shades.
Yeah. I think Trump wants Republicans to get rid of the filibuster, and just a lot of folks may know the filibuster means effectively that you need 60 votes rather than 51 to pass anything.
And it was famously nuked, the filibuster, by Harry Reid, and which is eventually what led Trump to get his appointments to the Supreme Court in his first term. So the debate now is, should we get rid of the filibuster so that Republicans can pass things and get things, open the government, and then pass legislation, because maybe they won't win in the midterms, and then everything will be stopped. And Trump's argument is,
the Senate is holding firm. John Thune says we're not doing it.
But Trump's argument, which isn't unfair, is to say, well, guess what? When and if the Democrats take power, what do you think the first thing they'll do is get rid of the filibuster, and they'll pack the Supreme Court, and they'll add Puerto Rico as a state. So if they're going to do it anyway, shouldn't we beat them to it and pass some legislation that helps our side?
That's kind of that's the sort of race to the bottom argument.
Aren't we at the bottom?
I don't know. I think one thing to say is, we live in an era of congressional impotence, so it is appealing to say, the works are so gummed up that, like, the issue we have is not stopping things from happening. It's getting things.
The point of the filibuster, in a sense, was to keep Congress from doing too much too quickly.
Right. So it's a solution to a problem that might not exist.
Does anybody think that the Democrats, if they were in power, wouldn't get rid of the filibuster at this stage? Look at everything else they've been willing to do.
They didn't.
Right, but we're in a different place. They got Trump 2.0. They've lost their minds. They've shut the government down over a CR that they've already approved. How do you know that they wouldn't just do it again?
Yeah, but that's why you have things like the filibuster. I feel like we're filibustering, but like that's part of the argument, right? Is that like,
no, but the filibuster is not a protection against somebody coming in and nuking the filibuster, right?
No, but it's a protection. It's a protection against this sort of ramming things through.
Only if you adhere to the decorum and you care about the institution itself. Do we have any evidence that is the case for Democrats?
Well, yeah, but Trump is the one who wants to get rid of it. So, I mean,
Right,
you
because
can
he
always
fears-
say in the future someone else, but like at the moment, the threat to the filibuster is Republican.
Yes,
Right?
but well, let's be clear. The
It's Trump.
Democrats first broke the filibuster in one of them. And now Trump is saying, I want to get rid of it because he fears that the Democrats will get rid of it when they take power. Isn't that a legitimate fear is what I'm saying?
I don't think so. I mean, you have to do what you think is right. You have to, I mean, the reason Senate Republicans are keeping it is because they're afraid, they think it's like a really important check, because they're thinking the same thing. They're thinking, what if it's the opposite situation, you know? So anyway, so I'm
just saying this mutually assured destruction principle worked for a long time when Democrats looked like Joe Lieberman and Republicans looked like fill in the blank.
Right.
We no longer look like that. We've just experienced that here in New York. The far left has taken over the party. The far right is growing. I'm not sure we can count on this.
All the more we need the brakes, right?
Yeah, I just don't think it's a break. If you can just bust it up when you want to, why is it a break? You know, maybe they should legislate that no one can nuke the filibuster anymore. That would be the break.
Right. Or like,
but just trusting the other side doesn't seem like a good bet.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I get it. I think it's interesting that this is an issue that Senate Republicans are willing to stand up to Trump on, and it's, I don't know whether they think it cuts to their prerogatives, it cuts to their but they're really firm on this, and so they're
maybe some of them who really dislike Trump would love to see, a Democratic Congress in the midterms and would love to see him stalled. I don't know. Yeah. It feels to me like if you really had this appetite to win right now, I'm not advocating for it, but I think you would get rid of the filibuster because
over a government
you're skating
shutdown
on thin ice.
You're skating. I hear you. I just think that Trump has really pushed the envelope a lot with executive actions and policies, and I mean, we were talking about this with colleges. You were worried that the techniques of pressure that Trump is pioneering were going to be used the other way, right?
100%.
So I think you do kind of have to be careful, especially with some of these results from Tuesday. We might not that be far away from a switch. So I don't know. On the other hand, the filibuster does kind of suck. I mean, it does prevent things from happening. I'm not like Mr. Filibuster. I think it's an interesting question of like norms, politics, how you sort of like negotiate this stuff. Okay.
If the Democrats take control whenever they do, and they will at some point, and they nuke the filibuster and pack the Supreme Court, I'm going to blame you.
Yeah. But wouldn't they do that anyway? Meaning, if Trump eliminates the filibuster now, they could still do that.
Right, but the argument is they could.
And what does Trump
the
get
right
in the
could
meantime?
legislate so many things right now if the Republicans would get on side that maybe they could legislate their way into a position where a lot of the negative effects of the next Democratic administration would be mitigated. Right. Yeah. I mean, that's they're sort of, it's like their last ditch hope when you're facing a far left like this that seems to have no boundaries, and maybe they say the same thing about the right, but we're at that place where nobody trusts the other side to hold the line.
Yeah, that's for sure. Okay, let's go to our sunlights this week. Go ahead, Rebecca.
All right, I'm back to food stamps, to the SNAP program, which we talked about last week. I just wanted to say a few things about it. I got a lot of hate mail. That I'm so cruel that I want to feed innocent women and children and all that stuff, which is so absurd, and like the reduction of a serious, complex issue into something so,
much
emotional.
After last week, between
I did, and it wasn't happy. It was not everybody's favorite last week, but I stand by my comments about SNAP, and I'm even more, convicted when it comes to this issue. First of all, everyone should know, right, that the USDA had requested data from states about the SNAP program, and about half the states, and it basically split on political lines, on partisan lines. So a lot of the Republican states handed over their data to find out who was taking it legally, illegally, who was an illegal immigrant, who wasn't, who had, 6 jobs and still was taking it, all those things. And most of the Democratic states not only refused to hand over their data, but sued the government for even asking the question. And so we don't know the full report yet. Brooke Rollins is promising to give us all the data, but we already see from some of the stuff that's dripped out that from the states that have given their data that there's tons of fraud. It's not to say that it's 90% of the program, but it's a program like so many other government programs that no one pays attention to. Of course, people are abusing it in a million different ways, not just that illegal immigrants are taking benefits that don't belong to them, but also American citizens who are gaming the system. And we should know all the data. It's our money. It's not the government's money. It's not the SNAP beneficiaries' money. It's American taxpayer dollars. And it can't be handed out like it's Halloween candy. I just wanted to point out some numbers. The Center for Immigration Studies analysis of the 2024 Survey of Income and Program Participation showed that 47% of households headed by non-citizens with children under 6 receive either WIC, which is the Women, Infants, and Children Nutritional Program, or SNAP, basically food stamps, or both. And that's compared to just 31% of U.S.-born households with young children. So a lot more people who have non-citizens at the head of the home are getting it than actual American citizens. And of all the immigrant-headed households, that's both naturalized citizens and illegal immigrants, non-citizens with young children, 43% are dependent on at least one of these programs. And if you break it down by the country of origin, it's 45% of Afghan immigrants, 42% of Somalians, 34% of Iraqis, and 23% of Haitian immigrants collect food subsidy benefits in this country. So I think it's reasonable for a country to ask itself, right, if you have huge populations, if you have populations of any size of immigrants from other countries coming to this country, and if large numbers of them, a third, a fourth of them, are on benefits, and that doesn't count the other welfare benefits that they get, Medicaid and other things, should we be limiting immigration from those countries until those numbers go down? Is it our responsibility to take care of immigrants? Is that our immigration policy? Or are we looking for immigrants who will help contribute to the country? It's not to say that if you're on SNAP, you're not contributing to the country, right? These are not people who are necessarily all scamming. They might be working, and they're also, they need help. But Americans need help too. Should we be bringing in large portions of people from other countries who can't provide for themselves, and how long should they be getting those benefits for? Can you be on this for 20 years, 40 years, as some people are? Is this like a food pantry program, or is this supposed to be a temporary program? So those are important questions to ask. And I just wanted to also point out that annual SNAP spending was $60 billion annually in 2019. It jumped to $100 billion in 2024. So here's the question: what happened in those years, right? COVID happened, but so did a completely open border policy in this country. So obviously our welfare spending went up. I don't have the breakdown of who got what and how much went to this population or other, but the problem is that none of us have that data because the states don't want to share it, and you'd have to ask why they don't want to share it. And I think it's immoral and cruel to not ask these questions, because under what theory is it moral to take other people's money involuntarily in the form of taxes and then just spread it to people that you want to give it to without any oversight and checking that the money is being spent well? That's immoral, actually.
Well, thank you for all those stats. I think that's important. I mean, I hear a couple of arguments. I mean, one argument is, and I think that's a good one, is sort of like, where is this money going? But it doesn't, I mean, not to be difficult about it, but it doesn't prove fraud. I mean, to say that, X percent of it proves that these are poor communities that are really dependent on the systems.
It's a mixture of both. It's a mixture of fraud and people who need. And I don't know the percentage, which one's greater percentage. Nobody knows. That's part of the problem.
Right.
But even if it is people in need, if they're people from other countries and they're coming here and they're in need, do I have a responsibility to bring in more people who are going to be in need?
Yeah, I think,
when they're vets sleeping in homeless shelters?
Yeah. I mean, I think, I think the SNAP is going to be another issue with the shutdown. I mean, as you say, the pain is going to be felt. It's a huge program, as the numbers indicate. So we'll see which way it goes.
Yeah.
Okay, so mine is. I think it's a story that maybe the news has moved past, but I just wanted to, highlight the return of some of the hostages, the bodies of the hostages, in no particular order. One is Itai Chen, Israeli American. The other is Joshua Molel, who's a Tanzanian African who was just in Israel to work and make a better life, and was murdered, and his body just now returned. A black man, to talk about race. I haven't seen any outrage. I haven't seen any agitation on his behalf, and I want to really focus on Ron Breslavsky and the heroism of Ron. you're talking about his sexual abuse at the hand of Hamas captors. What an incredibly brave thing to do. What an important addition to the historical record, to the case against Hamas, the case against, the kind of regime that was in Gaza. I don't have much, more to say than just to say, like, Ram Bosovsky, Israeli hostage, is a hero who suffered the most humiliating, horrific, sadistic torture and punishment, and is, a stronger person than any of us will ever be. And if anyone needed a reminder of the kind of really dark forces that being pro-Hamas and anti-Israel puts you in contact with, just look at Ram and look at what he went through. So especially this week when, the triumph of those forces, I think, at least in New York, sort of rattled a lot of us. It's both grounding and sort of focusing to know the sort of human stakes.
This is the kind of jihad that our new mayor wants to globalize.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
My sunburn is Zoran Mamdani, because there's just so much to sunburn him on. After winning, he said in his victory speech, "No more will New York be a city where you can traffic in Islamophobia and win an election." What a lie. What a vicious, racist, horrible lie that we don't buy anymore. This country's done with this identity politics thing, or at least I thought we were. But there's no Islamophobia that prevented Muslims from winning elections. He just won an election. This just smacks of like Michelle Obama complaining about racism during her husband's second term in office, right? It's just enough already. It's not true. White people aren't after Muslims and brown and black people. It's slander. It's racist. It's wrong. It's a lie. And that we have a mayor who got to be the mayor because of identity politics doesn't give him the right to use those identity politics to attack his constituents, even the ones who didn't vote for him.
Great. And my sunburn is the immolation of the Heritage Foundation. A lot of us might know this story already. We've written a couple editorials about it. Heritage swinging behind Tucker Carlson when nobody asked them, but recording a video, and after Carlson had Fuentes on. I'm not going to rehash all the details. Just going to say I think this is sort of what happens when sort of loyalty to a movement overtakes just like critical thinking, and I think there is this obsession with being on the right team and winning, and I just think it sort of totally, erased any common sense. I think Kevin Roberts is honestly not that bright. I don't mean to be mean, but I don't think he's an anti-Semite, but I think he was blind to this rising anti-Semitism on the right. I think there will have to be a reckoning at some point. I think, whether it's at the presidential level or vice presidential level or wherever, but, what an enormously depressing week to be Jewish, but also just to be someone who believes in the West and believes in these things, to see, Mamdani's triumph on the one hand, and on the other hand, this kind of, really awful anti-Semitism sort of strangely supported or applauded or indulged, I guess would be the right word. So it depressed
Kevin, but
me.
My sense when I saw this whole thing unfold was just not so much that he's an anti-Semite himself or defends anti-Semites. I think he saw it as like he wasn't even defending Nick Fuentes. He was defending Tucker's right to have Nick Fuentes, and it was sort of a free speech thing with him. I think it was strange that he came out voluntarily and said it. It wasn't forced out of him. He kind of offered it up, but that's him navigating maybe not so wisely, like this, who should we platform and deplatform and cancel and not cancel. And he got wrapped up in that as opposed to like, what is it that matters in your movement? But I think it's also really interesting to note, did you watch that Tucker Fuentes conversation? Yeah. Right? Did you recognize Nick Fuentes? I mean, he came across as like, to the right, but like a proper, lovely guy. And then if you watch his actual show, he's throwing F-bombs and saying the most outrageous, crazy things.
For
it was
what
the
Tucker
normalization
did.
of Nick Fuentes.
Exactly.
It wasn't even the content of what he said.
It's
was
like
that
laundering that.
creating this, laundering him and creating this image around him of something that he clearly isn't. that really is the most damaging thing.
Yeah, and just, in the same way that the left has this awful language we've spoken about, why is the president of a major think tank on the right talking about the globalist class and the venomous coalition?
Yeah.
I mean, it's weird.
Yeah.
It's
you
really
apologize for venomous coalition, but
it's really
once it comes out
weird.
of your mouth, I feel like it's too late.
It's really weird. So
right.
Anyway, we keep fighting the good fight.
Good luck, Ari.
Thanks, Rekha.